The burning sky of Krev 7 painted everything in shades of orange and red. Smoke rose from 1,000 fires across the battlefield where two armies had clashed for 3 long days. Now, silence covered the land like a heavy blanket. The fighting was over, but the cost had been terrible. Among the broken machines and fallen soldiers, something moved. Scarix lifted his massive head, his yellow eyes struggling to focus. Pain shot through his body like lightning. The Vorthian warhound had served the Galactic Coalition for 6 years, never once failing in his duty. He had been bred for war, trained to fight, and conditioned to protect his handler above all else. But now he lay alone in the dirt. His back leg was shattered, twisted at an angle that made even breathing difficult. Plasma burns covered his dark gray fur, still smoking slightly. Each breath felt like knives in his chest. Scarix tried to stand, but his body would not obey. He collapsed again, whimpering despite his training to stay silent. Above him, the evacuation ships hummed as they lifted into the sky. He could see them through his fading vision, growing smaller and smaller. The Zenthari warriors marched in perfect formation toward the loading zones. The Krell shock troops carried their wounded comrades on stretchers. The Vex flew overhead, their wings catching the smoky light. Scarix called out, a deep howl that echoed across the empty battlefield. His handler, Commander Thex, would hear him. Thex would come back. They had fought together for 4 years. Thex had fed him, trained him, and told him he was a good soldier. But no one came. The warhound did not understand the conversation that had happened 2 hours earlier. He did not know that Commander Thex had stood before the Coalition tactical officer, arguing for 30 minutes to be allowed to retrieve his companion. He did not hear the officer's cold response. The asset cannot self-extract. Medical resources are limited. Evacuation capacity is at maximum. The warhound is classified as non-recoverable. Your request is denied. Thex had looked back 3 times as he walked toward the ships. His 4 arms hung limply at his sides, his usually bright purple skin turned dark with shame. But orders were orders. In the Coalition military, efficiency was everything. Sentiment was a weakness. Resources went to those who could still fight. Scarix watched the last ship disappear into the clouds. His keen ears could no longer hear their engines. The realization came slowly, like ice spreading through water. They had left him. His pack was gone. After years of loyalty, of following every command, of throwing himself into danger to protect them, they had walked away. The warhound's head dropped to the ground. He was alone. As the planet's sun began to set, the scavenger drones appeared. Small mechanical creatures that fed on the remnants of battle, they skittered across the field like metal insects. Scarix growled weakly when one approached, but he had no strength to fight. His vision blurred. The pain was becoming distant now, his body shutting down. In his fading mind, Scarix remembered better days. Running across training fields under a blue sun. The taste of victory treats after successful missions. The feeling of Thex's hand on his head, praising him for a job well done. He had been a good soldier. He had done everything right. So why was he dying alone? The scavenger drone came closer, its sensors analyzing him. Scarix closed his eyes. He was so tired. The cold ground almost felt comfortable now. Perhaps this was simply how warriors ended. Perhaps loyalty only went one direction. A shadow passed overhead, but Scarix did not open his eyes to see it. Another ship, he thought dimly. More soldiers leaving. More warriors who would step over him without a second glance. The universe had made its judgment clear. He was not worth saving. The warhound's breathing slowed as darkness crept in from the edges of his mind. The human transport ship descended through the smoke like a metal bird. Sergeant Elena Reeves stood at the loading ramp, scanning the battlefield through her helmet display. Her squad had arrived 4 hours after the main coalition forces left. Their job was simple: search for salvageable equipment, check for survivors, and mark dangerous areas. Spread out, Elena ordered. Standard search pattern. Watch for unexploded ordnance. Corpsman James Chin moved carefully through the debris, his medical scanner active. Private Marcus Webb covered him, rifle ready. They had been on Krev 7 for 20 minutes when Chen's scanner beeped urgently. Sarge, I've got a life sign. Faint, but it's there. Elena jogged over, her boots crunching on broken metal. Where? Chin pointed to a crater 30 meters away. And there. Biosignature reads as Vorthian. It's barely alive. They found Scarix half buried in rubble. The warhound's breathing was so shallow that his chest barely moved. His eyes were closed, his body cold to the touch. Chin knelt immediately, pulling out his medical kit. Jesus, Webb whispered. They just left him here? Elena's jaw tightened. She had been with the Terran Expeditionary Corps for 8 years, long enough to know that the Coalition species saw things differently than humans did. But knowing did not make it easier to accept. Chin, what's his status? The corpseman worked quickly, his scanner moving over Scarix's body. Severe plasma burns, shattered femur, internal bleeding, extreme dehydration. He's maybe an hour from death. 2 hours if we're lucky. He looked up at Elena. Sarge, I can stabilize him, but we'd need to transport him back to the ship. That's going to take time away from the mission. Elena activated her comm unit. Reeves to Coalition Command. We have a wounded Vorthian warhound at our position. Requesting medical evacuation authorization. The response came quickly. Negative, Sergeant. Asset was classified as non-recoverable. Continue your assigned mission parameters. Command, this is a living being. We can save him. Sergeant Reeves, your orders are clear. The creature cannot return to active duty. Medical resources must be prioritized for recoverable assets. Proceed with your mission. Elena looked down at Scarix. The warhound's ear twitched slightly. Even unconscious, some part of him was still fighting to live. She thought about her own dog back on Earth, a German shepherd named Atlas. She thought about the promise every human soldier made, no one left behind. Command, with respect, our doctrine doesn't work that way. Sergeant, you are operating under Coalition authority. Elena switched off the comm. Eyes went wide. Sarge, did you just hang up on command? Chin, stabilize him. Webb, help me clear a path to the transport. We're bringing him home. They're going to file charges against you, Webb said, but he was already moving to help. Let them. Elena knelt beside Scarix, placing her hand gently on his head. Hey buddy. I don't know if you can hear me, but you're not dying today. Not on my watch. Chin worked with practiced efficiency, injecting stabilizing drugs and sealing the worst wounds with biofoam. As he worked, Scarix's eyes opened slightly. The warhound saw strange creatures around him. Not Zenthari. Not Krell. Something else. Something that smelled different. Through his pain, Scarix felt hands lifting him onto a stretcher. Gentle hands. Careful hands. Hands that touched him like he mattered. He tried to growl to protect himself, but his body would not respond. Easy, big guy, Chin said softly. We've got you. The warhound did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. It was the same tone Thex had used during training before everything had changed. As they carried him toward the transport, Scarix's confused mind struggled with a single thought. Why would these strangers risk themselves for him? Why would they defy their commanders? What kind of warriors saved those who had already been abandoned? The transport's ramp closed and the engines roared to life. Inside, Elena sat beside the stretcher, her hand still resting on Scarix's head. You're going to be okay, she promised. 3 weeks had passed since the rescue. Scarix lay on a specially designed medical bed aboard the human ship called Nightingale. The room was different from anything he had known before. It was quiet, clean, warm. Strange music played softly from speakers in the walls, something the humans called classical. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo checked the monitors beside his bed. The human female had kind eyes and steady hands. She visited him 6 times every day, always speaking in gentle tones even though Scarix could not understand her words. Good morning, Scarix, she said, running her scanner over his healing leg. Your bone is fusing nicely. The burns are almost completely healed. You're a strong one. Scarix turned his head away. He had been strong once. Strong enough to fight for 3 days without rest. Strong enough to take down 5 Ravager warriors in a single battle. But strength had not saved him. His pack had left him anyway. When the doctor touched his bandages, Scarix growled low in his throat. Not a threat, just a warning. But Sarah did not pull away like the Zenthari would have. She did not strike him for showing aggression like the Krell trainers. She simply waited, patient and calm. I know you're scared, she said softly. I know you don't understand why we're helping you. But I promise we're not going anywhere. The door opened and Elena entered, carrying a tray. The smell hit Scarix immediately. Food. Real food, not the nutrient paste the Coalition fed warhounds. His stomach growled despite his suspicion. Hey there, warrior, Elena said, setting the tray down. She had visited every day since the rescue. Sometimes she just sat quietly beside his bed. Other times she talked, her voice filling the silence. Chef made something special for you today. Real meat from the protein synthesizers. She placed the bowl on the floor and stepped back, giving him space. This confused Scarix. In the Coalition, handlers gave orders and warhounds obeyed. There was no choice. But these humans always waited for him to decide. Hunger won over pride. Scarix ate slowly, his eyes never leaving Elena. The food was good. Better than good. When he finished, she smiled and took the empty bowl away without trying to touch him. Over the following days, more humans came to visit. Chin brought medical supplies and checked his vital signs. Webb sat in the corner and read books aloud, his voice steady and soothing. Even the ship's captain, a gray-haired woman named Rodriguez, stopped by. "Heard you're recovering well," the captain said. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need. We've got plenty of room." A coalition liaison officer visited during the second week. The Zenthri stood in the doorway, his purple skin bright with agitation. "This is highly irregular," he told Sarah. "Warhounds are military property. The creature should be returned to his unit." "Scarix isn't property," Sarah replied coldly. "He's a living being and he stays here until he's fully healed. Your species is too emotional. You waste resources on damaged assets." Elena, who had been standing nearby, stepped forward. "Get off my ship." The officer left, but Scarix had heard everything. He understood tone even if not words. The human had defended him. Protected him. Just as he had once protected Thex. The breakthrough came during the third week. Sarah was fitting Scarix's new leg, a cybernetic prosthetic designed by human engineers. It was black metal with blue lights, strong and flexible. As she attached it, adjusting the neural connections, Scarix felt something strange. Oh. When the prosthetic activated, Scarix stood for the first time in weeks. The leg felt different but good. Strong. He took a careful step, then another. Sarah clapped her hands together, her face bright with joy. "You did it. Oh, you magnificent creature, you did it." Without thinking, Scarix moved toward her. Sarah froze, uncertain. But instead of growling, Scarix pressed his head against her hand. A gesture of trust. "Thanks." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she gently scratched behind his ears. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "You're home now." For the first time since the battlefield, Scarix believed it might be true. 6 months had changed everything. Scarix walked through the forward operating base with Elena at his side, his cybernetic leg moving as smoothly as his natural ones. Human soldiers greeted him as they passed, some reaching out to pat his shoulder. He had learned to accept their touch, even welcome it. The base was a joint operation housing both coalition and human forces. The difference between them was clear to anyone watching. The coalition soldiers moved with rigid efficiency, their formations perfect. The humans laughed as they worked, helped each other, stopped to check on wounded comrades regardless of species. Scarix had chosen his pack carefully this time. He stayed with the humans. Commander Thex arrived on a transport ship that morning. Scarix heard him before he saw him, that familiar four-legged walk. His old handler stood in the landing bay, flanked by 2 coalition officers. When Thex saw Scarix, his skin flushed bright purple with emotion. "Scarix," Thex said, his voice carrying across the bay. "My warrior. You survived." Scarix did not move from Elena's side. The warhound watched his former handler with eyes that showed no recognition of their bond. 6 months was a long time to remember abandonment. "We have come to retrieve coalition property," one of the officers announced. "The warhound will return with us immediately." Elena stepped forward, her hand resting gently on Scarix's head. "He's not property. And he's not going anywhere he doesn't want to go. The creature is military asset number 7-7-4-3. It belongs to the coalition." "His name is Scarix," Elena said firmly. "And he's a member of my unit now." Thex moved closer, speaking directly to Scarix in the Vorthian command language. "Come, warrior. We have new battles to fight. Your duty calls you home." For a moment, Scarix stood still. Part of him remembered the years with Thex, the training, the victories. But then he remembered the battlefield. The cold ground. The departing ships. The certainty that he would die alone because he was no longer useful. Scarix turned his back on Thex and sat beside Elena. The handler's skin turned dark gray with shame. "I had no choice," he said quietly, no longer speaking in command voice. "They ordered me to leave you. I argued for an hour. They would not listen. I'm sorry, old friend." "Your military doctrine considers wounded soldiers expendable," Elena said, her voice softer now. "We don't work that way. Every life matters. Every soldier comes home." The coalition officers grew angry. "This is unacceptable. The warhound must be returned." Captain Rodriguez appeared from the command center, her face stern. "Scarix has been formally adopted into the Terran Expeditionary Corps. He's earned his place through his actions here. 2 weeks ago, he saved a Zenthari soldier from a Ravager ambush, despite that soldier being the same species that abandoned him. It was true. Scarix had been on patrol with Webb when they heard the screams. A young Zenthari scout was pinned down, his weapon empty. Without hesitation, Scarix had charged into danger, his powerful jaws closing on a Ravager's throat. He fought with the same loyalty he had always possessed, but now that loyalty was given freely, not commanded. The rescued Zenthari had stared at Scarix in shock after the battle. "You saved me." "What? I am nothing to you." Webb had smiled. "That's what we do. That's what Scarix learned from us. Nobody gets left behind." Now in the landing bay, word of the confrontation had spread. Soldiers from multiple species gathered to watch. Many had heard the story of the warhound who was abandoned and then rescued by humans. Some had even changed their own behavior because of it. A Krell soldier stepped forward from the crowd. "The humans saved my clutchmate last month. Risked her life for one who could not walk. This is not weakness. This is strength we did not understand." More voices joined in. A Vex pilot. A Zenthari engineer. Even some coalition officers who had served alongside humans and witnessed their strange compassion. The testimony continued, each story showing how human values had begun to spread like ripples in water. Vex looked at Scarix one last time. "You have found a better pack," he said sadly. "Perhaps I can learn from them too." The sky over Krev 7 burned red again, just as it had a year before. Scarix stood on the same soil where he had nearly died, but this time he was not alone. Elena crouched beside him, checking her rifle. Webb and Chin prepared defensive positions around the field hospital that held 200 wounded soldiers from a dozen different species. The Ravagers had returned in massive numbers, overwhelming the coalition defenses. The order to evacuate had come 3 hours ago. But the wounded could not be moved quickly enough. "All units fall back to the evacuation zone," the coalition commander's voice crackled over the radio. "Repeat, full retreat. Leave the hospital. We cannot hold this position." Elena's hand tightened on her weapon. Around her, 30 human soldiers looked to her for orders. They had volunteered to stay behind, buying time for the wounded to be moved. But time had run out and the transport ships were leaving. "Command, this is Reeves. We have 200 wounded here. They'll be slaughtered if we leave." "Sergeant, your orders are clear. Extract your team immediately. The wounded are a lost cause." Elena looked at the hospital building. Through the windows she could see Zenthari soldiers with missing limbs, Krell warriors too burned to walk, Vex pilots with broken wings. All of them waiting to die because saving them was not efficient. She thought about Scarix left behind on this same ground. Negative command. "We're staying." "Sergeant Reeves, you are ordering your soldiers to certain death." Elena switched off the radio. She turned to her squad. "Anyone who wants to leave, go now. I won't stop you. But I'm not abandoning these people." No one moved. Webb checked his ammunition. Chin organized medical supplies. A young private named Torres began reinforcing the barricades. "All right then," Elena said. "Let's make them work for it." Scarix moved to the front line, his cybernetic leg gleaming in the firelight. He had been left behind once. Never again would he let others suffer the same fate. The Ravagers came like a dark wave across the battlefield, thousands of them, their screams filling the air. The humans opened fire, their weapons blazing. Scarix charged forward, his enhanced strength allowing him to tear through enemy lines. He fought not because he was ordered to, but because he chose to protect those who could not protect themselves. Inside the hospital, the wounded watched through the windows. A Zenthari officer, the same one who had argued for Scarix's return months ago, stared in disbelief. "They stayed," he whispered. "The humans stayed for us." On ships already in orbit, coalition soldiers watched the battle through their helmet feeds. They saw 30 humans and 1 warhound standing against impossible odds. They saw Elena pull a wounded Krell to safety while under fire. They saw Chin treating injuries even as explosions rocked the building. They saw Scarix place himself between the enemy and the hospital doors, refusing to let anything pass. Something broke inside those watching soldiers. Something that had been rigid for too long. Vex was the first to move. "I am going back," he announced on the command channel. "Commander, you will face court-martial." "Then I face it honorably." Vex grabbed his weapon. "I will not watch others die because we call it efficient. The humans have shown us a better way." One by one, soldiers from every species began to break formation. They commandeered transport ships, ignoring orders, flying back toward the battlefield. Not because they were commanded to, but because they finally understood what Elena had known all along. Every life matters. The reinforcements arrived like thunder, hundreds of coalition soldiers who had chosen compassion over doctrine. They crashed into the Ravager lines with renewed fury, fighting not for territory or orders, but for each other. The battle turned. The Ravagers, faced with an enemy that refused to abandon its wounded, retreated. As the smoke cleared, Elena stood among the survivors, exhausted but alive. Scarix sat beside her, his fur matted with blood but his eyes bright. Thex approached slowly, his weapon lowered. He looked at Scarix, then at Elena, then at the hospital full of saved lives. "Thank you," he said simply, "for teaching us what we had forgotten." Elena placed her hand on Scarix's head. "We all leave together or we don't leave at all. That's the only way that matters." Around them, soldiers from every species began helping the wounded toward the evacuation ships. The coalition would never be the same. A new doctrine was being written in the ashes of the old one, written by those who believed that the strongest warriors were not the ones who abandoned the weak, but the ones who carried them home. Scarix looked up at the sky, at the ships that would take everyone to safety this time. He was no longer the warhound who had been left to die. He was something more now. He was a soldier who had learned that true strength came from protecting others, that loyalty was meant to flow in both directions, and that home was not a place but the people who refused to leave you behind. He had found his pack. And this time his pack would never abandon him.